Welcome to another Charles Cormier podcast. We have a special guest today. His name is Michel Hora. Michel is founder, CEO at Continuum AG. He's all about soil health. He's a seventh generation Iowa farmer. He's about regenerative agriculture, which is a top topic right now. You can check out topsoil.ag. He's an ag grad, 30 under 30, Forbes 30 under 30. He's a lot of things, but today we're here to talk about agriculture, soil health, regenerative agriculture with Mitchell, which is the top expert to do so. So, Mitch, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to.
Yeah, no, you got a lot of it there, but yeah, I'm a farmer, number one, seventh generation. I've got two little kids that are part of the eighth generation of our family's 152-year-old farm. It's corn and soybeans, like basically every other farm in Iowa. But we grow some rye as well. We've been using no-till since the late 70s and cover crops now for more than 10 years. So these are some of the key soil health building practices. We've been able to do that on our farm. That's what enabled me to launch, or that's what prompted me to launch Continuum Ag. I started back in 2015 as an agronomy consulting company, helping farmers measure their soil health. Today, we're a global software platform that helps farmers quantify their carbon intensity. It's kind of like their carbon footprint per bushel is essentially what we can quantify. And we help farmers verify and monetize their data is what it boils down to. So we've got millions of acres across the country, and we work in a couple other countries around the world as well. And in minimal ways right now, the Midwest is absolutely the main focus. I'm trying to help farmers manage their data, protect their data, get compensated for their data, and be able to tell a more positive agricultural story. I got a couple other things going on as well, but especially with the Continuum Ag front, helping farmers monetize their data is the main thing.
Love it. And tell me about your childhood. Like, what was it like to grow up on a farm, and how did your father raise you?
Yeah. We were a very middle class type of family. I'm the oldest of five kids. So I've got four younger siblings. We're all fairly close in ages, within 7-8 years apart or so. So big family. I've got three younger sisters and a younger brother. And, being the oldest, I was involved in helping on the family farm from a very young age. So driving tractors at probably 10, 12 years old. I grew up on the farm and loving it. Mom had a part-time job in town, but the farm was the main thing. And then, always been involved in different agricultural stuff, from helping dad on the farm, but also, through 4-H and FFA and some of these things that a lot of farm kids do, growing pigs and taking them to the county fair and that whole deal, So, but it was a lot of just working for the most part. And like I said, being the oldest on a family operation, it's, you're the hired guy right away. Just, you don't get paid. It's part of it on a family farm. It's you help out, everybody pitches in and everybody helps. But I think it absolutely really gave me that entrepreneurial spirit from a very young age. Of course, I didn't realize that it was entrepreneurship at the time. And even early part of college, I still didn't really even realize what entrepreneurship was, or that I was an entrepreneur. But now looking back, I started my first lemonade stand when I was like 4 years old. There's a picture of cute little maid selling lemonade to old ladies, and then was, mowing yards and making hay and farming ground and raising pigs and just and working a part-time job in town as well. So just a variety of things, from a young age, where now looking back, it's like, oh yeah, I've always been an entrepreneur, and growing up in a family of farmers, farming is also very entrepreneurial, and you got to wear all the hats. So I'm just used to that and don't know any different. And it's translated today that now my wife and I have multiple businesses between the two of us, and a lot of different things going on, but I've never known any different,
And you're raising your kids on a farm nowadays. How does your parenting style differ from your dad's? What values did you kept, and what values did you throw away?
Yeah, I think my dad my parents are tremendous. We're still extremely close to them. We live actually about 25 minutes away from the farm now, so my kids aren't as, you know, in a tractor on the farm like all the time. Of course, when we're busy, when we're planting or harvesting, they're out there riding around as much as possible. They're gonna have a little bit slightly one step removed from the day to day active farming than what I grew up in, but they're going to see very aggressive entrepreneurship day to day is what they're going to see. Myself with the software company and the farm and commercial real estate, and my wife commercial real estate and a dance studio. That they're not going to see a normal 9 to 5, but
There you go.
I think teaching them to be kind and be good people, number one, but to be happy as well. And to me, that is the number one reason to be an entrepreneur is to do what you want to do and do what makes you happy. So I think that's going to be key. I think one thing that I'm going to be slightly different on than my dad is he really made a point to be at like all of our stuff and left opportunity on the table, and I really appreciate him for that. But he was very involved, probably almost too much. Where like, Dad, you had work to do. You didn't need to stress yourself out to try to be everywhere all at once. And I appreciate him for doing that. But I just also realized like I got a lot of stuff going on, and I'm not going to be able to be everywhere all the time. And I'm going to have to continue to work through that. Luckily, right now my kids are young. My daughter's 3.5. My son just turned 2 yesterday. So they're still young. I still got a lot of learning to do, but definitely the kindness and happiness number one, but also realizing that you can't be everything to everyone and you can't be everywhere all the time.
Right. And back then, how were you different from the city kids? What difference do you see between a kid that grows up on a farm and a
Yeah.
kid that grows up in a city?
I mean, I think the classic stereotype one is just the work ethic of like it's all day, every day, and on the weekends, like it's farming is not a 9 to 5 job. When the work's got to be done, it's got to be done. So I think that was, I remember as a kid, wake up in the morning, especially in like high school, junior high, right? Wake up in the morning and go be at the gym lifting weights by 5:30, 6 a.m., go to school, go to football practice after that, get home when the sun's starting to go down, and then go take over in the tractor for, a couple, 3-4 hours, working in the fields at night, and, go to bed at 11, midnight as a, I don't know, 14, 15-year-old, and then wake up and do it again. So I think that's different. I think obviously you can get strong work ethic from a lot of places. Obviously a lot of people have that, but when the work's got to be done on the farm, everyone's got to pitch in. So I think that was different. I think also the connection to the earth is different too, right? As farmers, we are, I view it as our role as farmers to be the shepherds of God's creation. And we have that tie to Mother Nature and to the earth and to the soil and to all the little critters that be. So I think that's a different aspect than a lot of folks get that aren't growing up on the farm, and just kind of that appreciation, right, for where your food comes from and Mother Nature. That is what enables life on this planet to sustain.
Right. You also have you have the hard work, that's for sure, but you also have the brains, right? Like, so you combine hard work with being smart, you get a lot of results, a lot of cash, wealth, and a bunch of other things. Not all farmers are like that. It's like a rich farmer and the
Mhm.
poor farmer, right? Like they're stuck in the grind. Where did you got these smarts? Like, where do you attribute that smartness of yours?
It's a really good point, a really good observation. For me growing up, farming was, our passion, was our lifestyle. We're multi-generational farms, and the Horas came over from Czechoslovakia back in the 1800s, and we didn't homestead the ground, but my family bought the ground from the family who homesteaded it, right? So like on the deed, there's two last names on the deed that it was the natives. Then European settlement came in, and it was settled by a different family, and then my family bought it from them, and we've owned it ever since. And of course, expanded, and things have changed over the last 150 years. But So I think that's different. But my family, I feel like mostly was still farming just as a lifestyle company, right? Where then me with even more aggressive business mindset, I go into it not just as it's a lifestyle business, but no, this is a legit business where we can run things with metrics and with good, strong financials and goals and systems and goals of growth and some of these fundamentals of business that we really stress in the venture capital startup type of space that I didn't necessarily see on the farm. We weren't aggressively trying to expand the operation. We weren't aggressively trying to uh, compete, but now learning from other farms that are significantly larger than my own and learning from business, I think I'm combining in that more aggressive business mindset, taking that back to the family farm. That what what I'm getting at and what it boils down to is there's a lot of farms like mine that are farmers number one and kind of figure out the business stuff number two. But I've learned from some very large operations and folks that think about it differently than how I was raised doing it, that they are business people number one. Their business just happens to be farming number two, and that's a very key shift. And I think it's going to be extremely important throughout my career in farming that it's going to be a lot of automation, robotics, AI. Like that's how I'm going to be running my family's farm in the future. And I'm going to have to utilize those technologies and strong business systems because I'm going to have to expand the operation and there's going to be less and less people involved in production farming. So I'm going to have to be able to handle more. I believe just because there's going to be fewer people that are interested in doing the work, and it's going to take strong technology and business acumen to be able to get it done.
Right. So, okay, I want to hear from you if farming is still worth it, because I mean, you grew up on a farm, right? So for you, I'm guessing it's worth it. It's nostalgia. It's who you are. Also, you literally grew up on that. But for a guy like me, like getting my hands dirty and all of that, and I can invest my time and money in B2B SaaS and make exponential money and AI ventures, for example.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Like maybe I would buy a ranch. I will buy a ranch in less than 10 years and probably have a vineyard and probably like experience
Yeah.
stuff there. But is it worth it for a common mortal to run a farm? And keep in mind that you have all the tools, you have all the technology, so you really like maxed it out. But for a guy that does it really know about that, is it worth it?
I think so. I mean, it takes a lot of money to get into farming, depending on what you're going to do and kind of the avenue that you're going to take it. If you find a niche opportunity, right? So having a vineyard that makes specialty wines or does it organically or in some type of a specialty brand, absolutely, you can make it work and you can find some niche opportunities there to make the business work very profitably. On our operation, we're talking about conventional row crop farming, right? Like large scale, we're growing a commodity just like everybody else. So we don't have necessarily that niche opportunity to focus on. We've got to focus on low cost of production, being very smart about playing in the commodity market, and then finding diverse opportunities to bring in new revenue. And that's what Continuum Ag does, and helping farmers monetize their data through different carbon credit programs and whatnot. But I think farming is, of course, a noble endeavor, taking care of the land, taking care of creation, feeding people. That's a noble endeavor, I think, and why ag is still, kind of held to a certain pedestal of sorts. But I think the key is as folks look to invest in agriculture or want to get into farming someday, that's great. I think the key is just to ensure that you're looking at it as not just a business, but having that connection to the land, the actual care of creation. And that's where, especially in large scale row crop farming, you hear about investors coming in to purchase ag land and stuff, and they're looking at it just purely from the financial, investment. They don't care about how it's managed or the environmental impact that it has. So it's about having balance, I guess, is what I'm getting at. That ag can be a great spot. It can be risky because it takes a lot of money and you're subject to the weather and so many outside factors. But I think as long as people are balancing, the business with doing the right thing and having that kind of shepherd mindset or caring mindset, like I think it's great.
I will get into all of this once robots are here.
That's
So, like, I know that humanoid robots might be a challenge on a farm, right? Like, think of the damp soil, for example, and all the like the irregularities on that type of field. How automated is your farm?
not super automated, but we're in large scale row crop farming where a lot of like the automation is coming in on specialty stuff, indoor farming, those kind of things. On our farm where we tie in automation is our tractors, they do drive by themselves, but they're driving in a straight line. We're sitting in the cab. We have to turn on the ends. Sometimes there's tractors already that will do it more autonomously than us. But at least on ours, it's kind of like setting cruise control, except for instead of putting cruise control on to control the speed, we still manually can control the speed, but the tractor keeps itself going in a straight line using GPS. So that makes things more efficient, right? To not be waving around and having irregularities or overlap in your application of seed or of a product. So it helps be more efficient and avoid waste and whatnot. But anyway, so definitely the tractor's got some automation to them, but some of the other stuff is actually on the technology around the grain management. So we can harvest our corn, put it into a grain bin, and a lot of times it needs to be dried down a little bit. You harvest the corn when it can sometimes be a little bit, have a little bit higher moisture. For example, be 22 to 24% moisture, and we want to dry it down usually to 16 or 17% moisture because it stores better and it keeps longer and doesn't spoil. Well, that whole system of taking the corn and enabling it to dry down, it's all fully automated. We turn it on, you kind of set the parameters, and then you walk away. And so we can harvest during the day and fill the grain bins during the day. And then at night, basically let the automated system manage the grain and get it in the proper moisture conditions so it can store better. So it's definitely a lot of stuff like that. Different thing, a lot of good technology there on managing the grain. We use a lot of technology in managing our fertilizer and managing our pesticide applications and whatnot. And in doing so and using good technology and utilizing good regenerative practices, we've been able to decrease our fertilizer consumption by 50%. And we've decreased our pesticides by 75%. I don't have the exact reduction in diesel fuel that we've used from the tractor technology and whatnot, but we absolutely know we've decreased our fuel consumption, and that automated grain bin system I was talking about decreases energy usage, or electricity usage, and natural gas or LP is used for the most part to dry down the crop. So all of those things end up, of course, saving us some money, but also doing better for water quality and environment as well.
That's very cool. And how off the grid are you? Do you use some solar? Because that would be another reason for me to start a farm or vineyard, just to be like off the grid. That's the prepper in me, sort of.
Yeah, there's a lot of farmers around us that do have solar or have wind energy and whatnot. We don't on our own farm, and it's just because we actually really don't use very much at all. So we probably easily could put on a couple solar panels and basically not have to be on the electrical grid at all. Now, we're in Iowa, where a significant portion of our energy is already renewable energy anyway. So, just the grid itself is already very low carbon footprint. We're number one for wind, and I believe number two for solar. As far as we might be number two for both, but top couple for both wind and solar. So, the state has invested heavily in those, renewable energies. A lot of farmers around us do use solar specifically, but a lot of times it's livestock farmers that use that, and they have their barns where they have their pigs or turkeys or whatnot that can get inside the barn, and they put solar panels on top of the barn and on the roof and be able to lower their energy usage that way. So something that we've talked about on our farm, I anticipate we will add it at some point, but up till now, we haven't pulled the trigger to do so. But a lot of farmers do, and I think an opportunity that you can utilize some of these technologies, especially that they've gotten so much better too over the last 10, 15 years. So um, it's
How do you
opportunity.
select all of these technologies, like your hardware, your software?
Yeah.
How do you A/B test that, and how do you do innovation or research and dev sort
Yeah,
of?
we try to learn from other farmers as much as we can and try to do our research ahead of time. But actually, on our farm, we are the early adopters. We're the innovators for a lot of things. So we do a lot of trials, a lot of testing, a lot of trial and error, and try to figure stuff out. You try to hedge that by starting small, where you can start small and not getting overly extended in some of these things. Some of the technologies just make sense, right? Like the GPS and the auto guidance and stuff. Like that makes sense. We know that it's going to be able to create a return, and it's going to make our farming system better. But yeah, some of these other automations, it's like maybe it's going to help, maybe not. So usually we try it out and maybe utilize the technology on a 1-year contract or a couple-year contract versus being locked in for a long-term thing. But we do a lot of testing, especially with specialty fertilizer products or biological products and things that are going to help us reduce our synthetic fertilizer, which has a very high carbon footprint to it. Also, synthetic fertilizer and the usage of it can lead to water quality issues and stuff if not done properly. So we've really tried to improve our efficiencies around our inputs, which is a big cost every year. So if we can be more efficient and do things in a more natural, soil health minded manner, it's going to put dollars in our pocket and lead to positive environmental outcomes as well.
Right. And you said that you're an early adopter. Maybe your neighboring farmers are not so much so. What's the life of a normal farmer, and what are their struggles, and how can you actually help them?
Yeah. I mean, a variety of different things. One, actually, so we're absolutely early adopters and innovators, but a lot of our other folks in our neighborhood actually are as well. We farm in a kind of unique area where there's kind of a group of farmers that are more innovative than kind of the norm. It's a very unique area. Washington County, Iowa is where we're at. There's case studies and things about our area and why there's such high adoption of soil health building practices and so much more innovation around here. So we're actually able to not necessarily be these weird guys way out doing this crazy stuff by ourselves. Like there's other folks that are also very, very innovative. But anyway, I think farmers, they're looking at how do they manage risk, right? Risk of too much too much rain, not enough rain, too hot, too cold. Weather is the biggest factor, always has been, always will be. Um, plenty of talk about climate change and that kind of thing. For farmers, it's always been a thing. It's always the biggest factor year in, year out. It was back in the 1930s with the Dust Bowl. It was back in the 1980s when my family switched to do a lot more no-till because of extreme weather back in the 80s. And it is today. It's always the big factor. So that's why we like building our soil health, to try to mitigate against that, use technology to mitigate against those outside risks. Also, policy and trade and all this stuff that's really crazy in the US right now, as far as tariffs and trade deals and inflation and all this stuff. Like it impacts us day to day. So farmers a lot of times are trying to lean on trusted advisors, try to get good insight as much as they can, and try to hedge by utilizing financial hedging and insurance and those type of programs, but also just try to be as smart as we can and try to reduce risk and reduce cost of production to be as resilient as possible. It is tough on the farm. A lot of farmers are basically a one decision maker trying to manage everything, and that farmer is the CEO, they're the CFO, there's the CTO, they're the operations guy that's actually got to get the work done. They might be the veterinarian and taking care of livestock as well, not just plants and being an agronomist. They've got to deal with policy and be tied in with their elected officials, and like a lot of moving parts on the farm, which is what brings about a lot of stress in ag. And actually, farming has one of the highest suicide rates of any industry,
Yeah.
which is a really sad deal. And I try to bring awareness to that. And the key is, I think what's going on there is the farmer is wearing a lot of hats, a lot of work that's got to be done, and they are the sole provider basically to get it done. In a lot of cases, that's a lot of pressure, a lot of stress put on a farmer. And then being in a commodity market that's subject to policy and trade and weather and a lot of things that are outside of a farmer's control, you kind of feel stuck to an extent, and that can really weigh on a person, and again be very stressful, and you feel out of control. You feel like you're not in control, right? Because in a lot of these things you're not, and I think that's where we see a lot of poor mental health issues and stuff like that. Also, a lot of farmers, of course, are old boys that are tough and want to try to continue to be tough, and they have a hard time reaching out for help and a hard time opening up and talking. Um, there is a lot more awareness about it now. There's a lot more programs to try to help address farmer mental health issues and the suicide issues. So it's becoming more aware. I think it's getting better, but it's absolutely still an ongoing issue.
Right. And what would be solutions for that? Is it being closer to your community, organizing these groups to just talk to your fellow farmers and find solutions to their problems and help them?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times farmers kind of working together. Farmers love social media as well. Especially Twitter has been big for farmers. YouTube is big for farmers. There's a lot of conferences and events and opportunities for farmers to get together and interact face to face. But on the mental health stuff, some of the universities and the extension programs have programs for farmers. The Farm Bureau has done a very good job as well. A variety of other groups. And plenty of that stuff that is, confidential and whatnot as well, right? And be able to help farmers feel more comfortable going that route. It's just like in other sectors as well, just more mental health awareness has become more prominent, more talked about, not as much of a mute topic. So it's trickling into farming. Like I said, farmers a lot of times farmers don't take care of themselves first. They take care of their land and their operation and their family first, and the farmer often takes care of themselves last. It's just kind of the way that it's always been, but moving in a better direction.
Want to talk about the climate change because you're one of these rare people that have anecdotal experience, but also empirical experience, right? You're like a very data oriented guy. So you've seen it firsthand, right? Like what do you say to climate change denialists?
Mm-hmm. I actually, I always go back to what I was saying before. The climate's always been our biggest factor on the farm. It's always going to be. And I feel like we're going to continue to be innovative and be resilient for whatever happens, right? But also having all this carbon in the atmosphere is actually almost a good thing for farmers, because carbon is actually the number one most important element to grow our crops and to grow yield. So actually, as a farmer, I can utilize all this carbon that's in the atmosphere and improve the yield and feed more people. Now, the carbon is supposed to be in the soil, though, not in the atmosphere. And we've lost a lot of our carbon out of our soils. But through regenerative practices and good old photosynthesis, we can capture that carbon as CO2, convert it into sugars through photosynthesis. And a lot of that carbon is pumped into the soil and is built up and stored in our soils. So what I educate farmers is, hey, there's going to continue to be less and less CO2 in the atmosphere as all these efforts work to reduce the CO2 in the atmosphere and reduce other greenhouse gases. Hey, let's capture that carbon now while it's in the air and available for free. Let's capture it through cover crops and other practices, capture that carbon and store it so we can continue to be resilient for when there is less carbon in the atmosphere. And as farmers, carbon is, and as humans, carbon is the building block of life. Humans are about 18% carbon. Plants, it's the number one element that they need for life. So we need that carbon. We just need it in cycle down here closer to the surface, and utilizing it in a positive way to grow our crops and grow yield and be resilient, be sustainable. And that's just what was screwed up in the past, is that we were taking all this carbon that was below ground, right, as coal, as oil, as organic matter in the soil, and then through tillage and mining and burning of these, fossil fuels and stuff, that carbon was just released in the atmosphere. Well, what I always, educate farmers about is a lot of that carbon was in our agricultural soils, and it was supposed to be getting released out of the soil. Microbes breathe off or respire CO2. Of course, microbes don't breathe, they don't have lungs, but they respire CO2 just like we do. And in 1 teaspoon of soil, there's more than 8 billion microbes. Okay, and 1 teaspoon of soil, a tiny little teaspoon, more microbes than there are people on the earth. And those microbes respire CO2. And if there's not a living plant on top of that soil, that CO2 will just keep going up in the atmosphere. And that's why agriculture contributes to about 10% of the US's carbon footprint. And that's a part of it. But God put the stomata on the leaf, on the underside of the leaf, for a reason. That's kind of the opening on the bottom side of the leaf that CO2 enters the plant through that opening. It's on the bottom side of the leaf because the plants are supposed to get their CO2 from the microbes in the soil, not necessarily from the atmosphere up above. They're supposed to get their carbon from down below. So if we can continue to educate farmers about that and help them utilize that carbon correctly, keep it in the soil and keep it in this smaller carbon cycle where it's soil to the plant, back to the microbes, and kind of keeping it down there, then it's not a problem. It's actually a good thing. But a lot of farmers have just, we've kind of gotten stuck in this big industrial ag system where some of those basic fundamentals of photosynthesis and biology, they've kind of gotten forgotten about to an extent. But there's a major movement to bring that back and to ensure that farmers understand those basic, basic scientific components. And that's going to lead then to farmers not only being part of the problem today, but we can actually be carbon negative and be a massive part of the solution.
And yeah, climate change also brings like greater storms and more extreme type of weather events. How do you mitigate those?
Yeah. And we've seen it, as well, between wind and heavy rains and all that. The key for us is again, back to building healthy soil. So if you've got healthy soil, healthier soil can infiltrate water better. So you don't have flooding and you're able to actually hold on to that water. So if it gets droughty in the summer, which we often do, better soil can hold water better and be able to mitigate against those issues. In our soils, we talk about the soil having organic matter, and a good soil would have, call it 5% organic matter or so in my neck of the woods. A lot of soils have about 3% organic matter. But for every 1% organic matter that a farmer can build in their soils, they can hold on to about 26,000 gallons of water for every 1%. So if you're over 5%, like a lot of my farms are, we can hold over 100,000 gallons of water per acre, 100,000 gallons per acre. And we're farming, 1,000 acres, a little bit more. That's a lot of water that we can hold on to and store up here versus having that water cause flooding and issues downstream and contribute to, more water going in the ocean and all that kind of stuff. Like we can actually hold on to it where it's supposed to be and fix some of the local water cycle. A lot of details and, science to that we don't need to get into, but I think a lot of farmers looking at, hey, I need to be resilient, whether it's too much rain, not enough rain, too hot, too cold, too windy. Let's try to be as resilient as we can. Now, some of these things you can't avoid, if it's a tornado or heavy wind or hail or whatever, that's going to take out your crop. But that's where there's insurance and there's, financial risk mitigation tools to avoid that. But at least on my farm, as an example, before we started doing a lot of regenerative practices, we used to have to replant a lot of our crop every year, or a portion of our crop basically every year, meaning we would plant our corn and soybeans usually in late April, and then we'd get heavy rains in May, and then we'd have to replant some of the crop because it died because of too much rain. We have not had to do any replant now in like 9 years because our soils take in that water, manage things correctly, and our crop doesn't suffer and drown out because of our inability to manage that water. And to put a number on that too, for any data-minded folks on here like me, across the U.S., the national average water infiltration rate is that our soils can infiltrate 1/2 of an inch of rainfall per hour. Half an inch rainfall, centimeter and a half in a 1 hour time frame. There's plenty of times where we get rain that is a lot heavier than 1/2 of an inch of rain in an hour. On my family's farm, we can infiltrate 4 inches of rain in under 5 minutes. Wow. So when we get a heavy rain, we can really take in all that water. It doesn't flood away. It doesn't overflow our creeks and streams. It doesn't wash to the side, carrying soil and residue and potentially pesticides and fertilizers. Our water stays and gets filtered through our soils and gets held on to. And that's a really, really important thing. And it's made us not near as susceptible to adverse weather conditions.
Now, when you started talking today, you mentioned like reselling farmers' data, right? Like with CO2. Tell me a bit more about that in your software company.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. So what we are specifically working on at Continuum Ag is helping farmers measure their carbon intensity, which is essentially their carbon footprint per bushel of production. Farmers are part of the scope 3 carbon footprint for basically every single supply chain in the world, right? Farmers and our carbon footprint is part of your carbon footprint, part of humans' carbon footprint. Like as you eat, as you drive a vehicle that has fossil fuel in it, or has a biofuel in it. So many different things. Farmers are part of the supply chain. And what we help farmers do is quantify their actual carbon footprint. We give them tools to lower their carbon footprint, and we help them verify their carbon footprint through a third-party accredited ISO auditor and ISO verification process. With this data, farmers can basically sell we call it a CI certificate is what we create. So we quantify their carbon intensity and we issue them a verified CI certificate, and farmers can sell that data like a carbon credit. But the emerging opportunity is in the biofuel space. And in the US, we have the 45Z tax credit, which is for low carbon biofuel like ethanol and sustainable aviation fuel and biodiesel. And today, farmers are about half of the carbon footprint of those fuels. And for gasoline, for example, gasoline today has a carbon intensity score of about 100. Today's average gallon of ethanol has a carbon intensity score of 53. So ethanol is about half the carbon footprint of regular fossil fuel. And of that ethanol's 53 carbon intensity score, the corn has a default score of 29. So of the ethanol's carbon footprint, the corn is more than half of the emissions. On my farm last year, our score was 2.6. 0, of course, would be carbon neutral. And the year before, we actually were a -4 on our corn, carbon negative. My soybeans last year were a -19. So when we farm, our corn, we're right about carbon neutral. And some years we can be slightly carbon negative. Our soybeans are consistently carbon negative. When we farm, we sequester more carbon than what we emit through our use of diesel fuel and transportation and storage and all that kind of stuff. All those things have an emission, but we actually sequester more than we emit. And now Continuum Ag in our software, Topsoil, helps farmers gather that data and third-party verify them through the ISO protocols. And now through 45Z and other carbon credit efforts, farmers can actually get compensated as they decarbonize and basically utilize corporate ESG goals and some of these carbon credit opportunities and policy opportunities to incentivize more farmers to decarbonize and adopt these soil health practices like my family's done for years. But we need more people to adopt these practices, and it can be risky to change. It can be scary to change, but some of these new policies bring about a financial opportunity that can get a farmer over the hump of, over the hump of change and over that risk. And yeah, Continuum is helping millions of farmers to do that, and we've or millions of acres to participate in this. And across our entire network, we have found that farmers on average today are actually have reduced their carbon footprint by 60% versus what the current scientific standard is. So, so much of this carbon footprint stuff, right, is we don't have all the science really brought about yet. Not everybody's quantified their footprint. Not everybody knows how to quantify it, and we're helping farmers to quantify it and tell their story. And we found that they're actually doing 60% better than what they've been given credit for. We all can continue to do better, but that's where Continuum Ag is helping farmers understand that, monetize that, and thus, improving their profitability and their resilience by adopting more regenerative practices.
And that's crazy. I like how you explain things. It's so digestible, and the numbers part. Like I rarely hear farming people talk about numbers, so it really appeals to me. Tell me about numbers in terms of customers, right? Like what is your pricing? How many customers use you, and also what's hard when it comes to selling your software to these ICP of yours?
Yeah. I'll start with that one. What's hard right now is there's a lot of unknowns in U.S. policy. So this 45Z deal that I'm talking about was part of the Inflation Reduction Act that the Biden administration introduced and passed back in August of 2022. The program went into effect on January 1st of this year, 2025, right? So the law was passed in 22. It went into effect in 2025, but the Biden administration did not finalize the rules before they left office and Trump came in. So they actually kind of dropped the ball a little bit, to be honest. Now, Congress has been working on what they call the Big Beautiful Bill. Right, it's this new tax bill, and they've cut a lot of the subsidies, except they've been protecting 45Z because it kind of balances both sides of the aisle, which I think is really important as we have some of these conversations. That you got to do things that are good for everybody and for both sides of the political spectrum, and try to at least have the right talking points to get everybody on board. And that's what this has done, right? And when you look at the U.S.'s carbon footprint, transportation, agriculture, they're huge emitters in the grand scheme of things. So this biofuel policy helps to decarbonize transportation and energy and agriculture, but also enables liquid fuels to still be a viable thing, lowers energy costs, which is, of course, what President Trump has been pushing, right? Energy, and trying to lower energy costs and thus lower inflation. So this ties to that piece. And it also, helps out a lot of Midwest, conservative states, while still doing a tremendous amount of good for decarbonizing an environment. So it's had good bipartisan support. It was already voted on to stay and actually get extended as part of the Big Beautiful Bill through the House of Congress side of things. The Senate is working on the bill right now. It just got released out of committee on Monday as we're recording this, just a couple days later. So it's moving forward, but the problem is we don't have the final rules yet, and it's still it's in law, but it hasn't really been started yet. So unfortunately, we're kind of sitting still, waiting for more clarity, and Continuum has been diversifying into other things and trying to help farmers move forward. But when it does move forward, which it looks like it will, a third of the corn that we grow in the U.S. goes into ethanol and would be subject to this credit. A third. It's about 5.4 billion bushels that goes to ethanol every year. And when corn goes to ethanol, there's something called a DDG. It's a distiller's grain that comes out, and that can be used as animal feed There's oil that comes out that can be used for a variety of things. There's multiple different products that come out of the ethanol process, not just ethanol. There's feed and other stuff that come out too. But anyway, point being is, as this program goes forward, it's subject to a pile of the U.S. market, and I'm sitting right dead center of it. It's about a $6 billion a year opportunity if this is to roll out, is what our projections are, and a huge opportunity. And we've been able to help farmers managing over 360 million bushels calculate their CI score, which we do for free on our software, topsoil.ag. And then we've been able to help hundreds of thousands of acres and tens of millions of bushels actually get verified and get that third party audit stamp of approval. So to boil that down to some specific numbers, just in corn going to ethanol in the US, 5.4 billion bushels would be subject to this credit. We've already scored 360 million bushels. And as the program launches, our projection is to 1 billion bushels a year, 20% of the US ethanol market. And we've already did 29 million bushels as a pilot and as kind of a test. We were able to pass the audit. So we know we can do this. We've got the technology built out through our software and are able to help farmers do this in a cost-effective manner, where it only costs about 3 cents a bushel to undergo this audit. And the average value of the data is $1.02 a bushel. So cost 3 cents, the total value is $1. Like that can work, right? And leave enough margin in there for the different players. But yeah, we have about 2 million acres that we have scored in our system, and as you look just at the state of Iowa as well, a good percentage of the market, but the barrier is just the unknown. So we have the infrastructure built to create supply, but the demand is basically halted right now because of lack of policy. So there's no actual money exchanging right now to compensate the farmers for these CI certificates. Looks like that could be changed in the coming couple months, and so we're ready for that. But it kind of stinks. We're in a bit of a holding period right now.
Right. Plus the tariffs, right? Like, how are the tariffs affecting you and your clients?
So actually not that much right now. And they've kind of been on and off and on and off. But because of the timing of them, farmers basically already had their fertilizer purchased. We already have our inputs purchased for the year. So for the 2025 season, we already had this stuff in the US. So it wasn't that big of an impact. Now, looking forward, absolutely. I mean, if it could absolutely drive up the cost of some of our inputs and cut into farmer economic opportunity. But for the most part, I think it's causing people to just kind of hold their breath, which is not a good business strategy, to hold your breath and wait. But unfortunately, there's so much whiplash, I think, and just so much on and off and on and off that it kind of forces people to just kind of sit and hold their breath until we get more clarity. And that's still, it's going to be a battle for a while to know exactly what's going on. But at least for right now, it hasn't been too bad.
Give me a portrait of what's it like a day in your life. I must guess it's like 16-hour days at least. How much do you invest your time in consulting, software company, farming, and real estate investing, and being a dad and everything that you do? I'm pretty sure you still work out as well.
Yeah. Get up and able to get up and work out in the morning before the kids and wife wake up, and that works well for me. Get up and get going, nothing too crazy, usually 6 a.m. and get things going there and get to the office around 8. My wife has the dance studio, so she works in the evening, so she can take care of kids and stuff in the morning. And my kids are young, so they're just getting up and rolling by the time I'm leaving the house. A lot of times I'm at my office. Continuum Ag is by far my main thing. So it's in the office, usually 8 to 6 or so, at least. And then luckily now I've got a great employee base. We've got some real systems built out, so I don't have to necessarily work 15-hour days anymore like I used to when I was getting things going.
Mitch, I think we lost you.
So I'm able to kind of spread. Release.
You're back
Shoot.
now.
I said again. Um, uh, I'm really fortunate that at Continuum Mag we've got 14 full-time employees now, and I'm able to kind of spread out the workload a little bit. So I have my responsibility at Continuum Mag, but I'm mostly able to work on the business. I'm not necessarily in the operation side of things. I'm not necessarily I help on a lot of sales stuff, but a lot of the things now we've been able to build systems over the last 10 years, and the company doesn't require me to be in on every single thing, and I've been able to build out the right teams and people and delegate. I'm out on the farm when it's busy time, in the spring and in the fall when we're planting and when we're harvesting. So that's what's going on there. And then my wife teaches dance in the evening, so a lot of times I'm the one that's going and picking up the kids, whether that be from my mother-in-law or from the babysitter, and I'm taking care of kids and making dinner and stuff in the evening. And I'm involved in a couple organizations as well, like Farm Bureau and EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. And so I'm on some boards and stuff with that. The buildings that we've got, my wife's dance studio is the sole tenant in one of our buildings. Then in our other building, it's the dance studio plus 3 other commercial tenants, and we have an Airbnb upstairs. So I'm able to manage that, but it's mostly from my phone and being able to manage our cleaner and manage those the tenants and the Airbnb mostly from a distance. My wife's main company, the dance studio, is there, so if we need anything day to day, she's around. But no, that's all worked out pretty well. But yeah, try to spend time with the kids and family and stuff, especially in the evenings, and especially this time of year, make time to get out on the boat and go to the lake on the weekends and have fun. But I think I've had a lot of struggles in the past of not having good balance and just being hammered down. We gotta make it happen. We gotta work all day, every day. There was a lot of time where, I was at the office before 8 and leaving after 9, and then my wife was also teaching dance till 9, and I'd still beat her home and have dinner ready by the time she got home and hang out for a little bit and go do it again the next day. But things we've been able to, I think, find a decent balance here now, while at the same time keeping as many of the balls in the air as I can. But I also realize I got a lot of different stuff going on, and try not to get too hard on myself when some things I do drop the ball on.
Right. Tell me about real estate. Is commercial real estate still a thing if people are working remotely? And then what about farmlands? Like if I would buy farmlands, would probably to establish a racetrack or a sports stadium or something wild, because there's a lot of space and it would be cheap. Like, tell me about these 2 aspects of real estate.
Yeah. I bought farmland back in 2017, right when I graduated from college. It cost me about $9,000 an acre, which at the time seemed very expensive. But even today, over the last 8-9 years, that farmland has appreciated not quite double, but probably not that far off if I were to sell it. Now, I would never sell it, right? I'm going to hold it. That's the whole point of multi-generational farming, is we're invested in the land, get the mortgage and pay it off over time, and then have it to pass on to the next generation, right? And then continue to build up and invest in it that way. Ag land can be a good investment, but it also is, just as a pure like cash investment, it's going to be really tough to do it as just a pure cash investment. But it can build up value over time if you're a patient investor long term. It can be a viable thing. On the commercial real estate stuff, this is small town Iowa. Our buildings are in the town of Fairfield, Iowa, where it's a town of about 10,000 people. They're right on the town square. Right in the Midwest, there's all these little towns have their little town square, right, where you got a park in the middle, or the courthouse building in the middle, and then you got these Main Street businesses around it. So I think it's a good long-term viable type of thing, and the buildings will continue to maintain and build value. But the dance studio, it needs an actual physical presence, and my wife has been able to build out a nice size, a large dance studio there, and they need the space. And then one of our tenants is a boutique. So it's a women's clothing boutique, which is very strategically placed right next to a dance studio that has a lot of, younger moms and stuff that are going in and out. But they do a lot of business online as well. But it's good for that boutique to have a physical presence than an online presence. The other commercial real estate space is rented by a kind of a beautician type thing or a med spa, doing Ozempic and Botox and facial stuff and all that, that I don't know all the details about, but they need a physical spot. So I feel like the buildings that we're in, it's not office buildings. It's small town Main Street shops and service business. So it's been good. It's been a stable thing. And what's great for us is my wife needed the space for the dance studio, and better to invest in our own real estate and our own mortgages and build up equity and build up build up wealth in those businesses versus paying somebody else rent and building somebody else's net worth. So it's been a good thing. We're a couple years into it and making some got to make some major repairs here with upkeep on roof and ACE units, and so learning about being a landlord for sure. But I think it's right. It's been a great move so far, and I think going to continue to really be a good, smart move, and again, kind of an investment for our future as well. And those buildings, would sell them off at some point is the plan, but in 15, 20 years or whatever.
Right. Diversification is always a good move. Mitch, thank you so much for coming on the pod. It was incredible. I had many AG guests on the pod before, but none like you that explain with the details and the numbers. I really like that. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, Continuum Ag is where I'm at. But if you search Mitchell Hora or Continuum Ag or 45Z, you'll find us all over the social media channels. And my podcast is the Topsoil Podcast, mostly just ag. It's just farm talk. But if people want to learn more about some of this, that's where it's at. But yeah, this has been fun. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. So that was Mitch and Charles for